Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Mike. Good afternoon to everyone. This is the fourth of a series of subgroups that we're hosting on behalf of the county's Board of Supervisor Economic Development Committee and the chair, Matt Morrell, in order for Columbia County, which is attached to the Capital District, to be able to reopen in a phased one systematic process. And so this is the fourth phase, which includes recreation and education. And we wanted to have an opportunity for those who are currently studying and weighing what kind of processes and cleaning and social distancing measures you have to implement before you can reopen. This focus group is for you. Just by way of housekeeping, we have a full committee meeting this Tuesday, May 26th. And I believe the time is 1 o'clock. I have to check. I think it is 1.
Yes, it's 1 o'clock.
And so stay tuned for that. If you're not on the committee, you can join the committee by, there's a ColumbiaComeback.com has the meeting notices there. And if you're not on the committee, you can join via YouTube to see the full committee discussion coming up this Tuesday. But specifically today, we're here to talk about phase 4 in the reopening of the governor's process. Thank each and every one of you for joining today.
Thank you, Jeff. When the committee was formed, it includes, in addition to Matt Morrell, the chair of the Board of Supervisors, and Jeff and I, 3 county supervisors, Supervisor Robert Bury from the town of Germantown and the chair of the Economic Development Committee, Supervisor Robert Lagonia from the town of Austerlitz, who also is a restaurateur in Chatham, and Supervisor Tristia Hoteling of New Lebanon. And in addition to 14 individuals representing an equal number of industries. And it was a very popular committee in the sense that once it was announced, many people, including many of you, I'm sure, asked if they could join the committee. We are happy to have you join in this capacity because, as you can imagine, with 16 industry representatives, and there are industries we didn't get. We had a question today: could we make sure that we include religious leaders and organizations? We did have a call with librarians and other groups. So we are attempting to be very inclusive, and I hope that you all consider yourself an extended member of the committee by your participation here today. When we first set this up, we came up with a list of 7 goals. The first being that our goal is to minimize the spread of the virus and prioritize public health. Understand state level regulations and keep all of you updated. Help businesses adapt to the new norm and through different programs and initiatives that both the Chamber, CEDC, and other business-related organizations have. Number 4, coordinate countywide collaboration and the development of a central resource hub. We've been working on a number of collaborative projects, as well as we did create the Columbia Comeback webpage, and that we continue to add resources to it several times a day. I think this is probably one of the more important ones, setting realistic economic expectations. And as you phase, as first we're allowed to open a phase, each phase is going to have some level of phase within it. You'll recall when the governor indicated that offices had to cut back to 75%, and then 50%, and then 25%. So as we get into some of the guidelines and some of the requirements, we'll see that there in certain industries and certain phases, there will be sub-phases. Actively support business to ensure future growth. We've done some grant programs. We have some loan programs available, which we can discuss. The governor just announced a $100 million small business loan fund. And that information is on forward.ny.gov, which is the state's equivalent of the Columbia Comeback website. And finally, prepare for future disruptions. And I guess the concern there is, as you know, as each phase opens and each phase adds more activity to the economic platform, their state's going to be continuing to monitor the number of hospital admissions, the number of deaths, and the metrics that were required to be in place before we could open phase one. And so if we can, it's incumbent on us to continue to be responsive in a practical way that meets the needs of business to sustain the distancing and the other social aspects of this to minimize the infection. Because if we don't, it's pretty clear that those metrics change. We're going to be right back in our stay-at-home mode. And as you know, businesses and organizations are, we really have to get to a point where we can begin to generate revenues again, not only to cover the fixed expenses we've been absorbing over the last 2 months, but to begin to cover the variable expenses that we have to incur to deliver the goods and services and experience to our clients and customers. As you know, the first phase opened on Wednesday, and the first phase included construction, manufacturing, select retail at curbside pickup, as well as some outside activities at where there was tremendous open space that included drive-in theaters, tennis, and I think that you're aware that there were many essential businesses, whether as designated by the state, that definition of essential was fairly broad, who were already up and running, and many of those included areas for open recreation. The rules keep changing. You may have heard today that you can have a 10-person Memorial Day observance. You can have religious services with, as long as there's not more than 10 people. And some of this is trial by error. There's a lot of confusion. There's some, restaurants are open now for takeout only, off-premises takeout only. A number of restaurants, are putting tables outside the restaurant to allow someone to have their takeout on the premises. Technically, that's not permitted, but how that's going to be enforced, I think will be something that perhaps the State Liquor Authority has the best ability to convey that to their licensees. But at the same time, how frustrating is that if I can't sit at the table outside your restaurant, but I can cross the sidewalk and sit on the park bench and eat my takeout from your restaurant on my knees? There's no one answer to any of these questions, and as the more rules there are, the more exceptions and the more people who are going to feel that they don't apply in a realistic and common sense way to them. So I think we all have to realize that today's answer may be tomorrow's misinformation. It's cumulative. Each day, things are added. We now have a regional control room that includes the 8 chief county elected officials from our 8-county region: Warren, Washington, Columbia Green, Albany, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady. That includes Matt Morrell, the chair of the County Board of Supervisors here in Columbia County. It also includes Ruth Mahoney, the president of T-Bank in New York, as well as the co-chair of the Capital Region Economic Development Council, and General Patrick Murphy, who is responsible for emergency management and homeland security for the state. That group, there is an information, there's a info at email address for the Capital District Control Room. We can make sure you have that for you to be able to submit specific questions to a level that has at least the potential of providing a better answer than Jeff and I at times. We're basically doing much of what you're doing, and that's digesting all of the material that's out there and trying to find shortcut ways to communicate it with you. And at the same time, at the end of the day, we have to go back to the original documents and the detail. To enable the phase 1 opening and for essential businesses that were previously opened, the state dictated that you have to read a 11-page set of guidelines and you have to attest to your commitment to follow those guidelines, as well as prepare using a state template or your own template, a safety policy that's focused on ensuring the health and safety of your employees and your customers. We've had some, I saw a list that was released yesterday. The state notified Columbia County, I believe it was about 38 businesses who have already who have already attested to the guidelines, and they've read them and they agree to comply with them. On the flip side, your safety plan does not have to be filed with the state, but it has to be available in the event that the county health department or state health department would like to see it. We feel that the main reason they would like to see it is if someone on your premises or someone who has visited your business or organization's facilities is infected and reports themselves, or you report your employee to the health department as someone who is infected, that then the state can have the tracers come in and get information about who the person who was infected was in touch with, who they had contact with, and then those tracers will go out and contact those people, and depending on the nature of the contact, suggest they either self-quarantine for 14 days or go under mandatory quarantine. Right now in the county, there's about 350 people under mandatory quarantine because of having been in contact with people who were tested positive for the virus. One of the things that's required of you as an employer in these guidelines is, and we've all had those questions asked now of us, if you've been to a doctor or a business, whether you've been to New York City, whether you've been out of the country, whether you have a temperature, and there's still some clarification needed as to what's actually required and then what documentation you must maintain. It does say that you have to ask anyone that comes into your facility, your employees and your clients, a series of questions, and to take or ask them what their temperature is. Some of the suggestions in a webinar link that we will provide you is a link to a webinar they did last Saturday through the Small Business Development Center at the University of Albany, outlining the specifics and talking about some of the ways to implement the requirements. In one case, the suggestion was that rather than have your employee come to the office or to the facility and take their temperature and find out that they shouldn't have come and send them home, that they should self-take their temperature and email the information to the business or organization. In addition, for larger companies, I understand some entrepreneurs have already created some apps where I guess the phone can take your temperature when you open the app, and the details go right to the cloud, and the HR department at your facility can go online and have the temperature. At the same time, it's pointed out, and someone was kind to correct me, and I looked it up. the guidelines say that you can't maintain the records of those temperatures after you review them because that's a violation of HIPAA. So there was a discussion that you have to keep a log. The interesting thing is the regulation says, the guideline says that the management has to review the log at the end of the day, but then I guess you have to throw it away. So, you know, we're going to have to try to work through some of these things. I think as people in phase one test them and begin to try to implement what's recommended, you know, perhaps there will be some further guidance or clarification or even modification. Jeff, did you have other aspects before we, you know, go into, you know, I think phase two, as many of you know, is professional services, finance, insurance, retail, administrative support, and real estate brokers. 3 is restaurants, food services, hotels that were not essential, and or hotels that were open that have restaurants or other facilities that were not considered essential. And then last but not least, all of you, phase 4, arts, entertainment, recreation, and education. And we're pleased to see Dr. Carly Drummer, the president of Columbia Green Community College here. And I know both she and Neil Howard, the superintendent from the Taconic Hills School District, are both on the committee. And we welcome you. I know Neil was on one of the calls earlier in the week. I don't know if he's here today or not. As we go through this, we have had an outreach by a group of arts and cultural organizations that we did have a call. I see Sean Sawyer here who had helped set that call up. I think it was a good start. I'm glad to see so many of you who participated in that back here today to share your thoughts and your information. And we can now go back to Jeff and then get into a conversation about phase 4, which, if the governor's plan release works, will be every 2 weeks a new phase will open.
Right. Thank you, Mike, for that. I think it's important that even though your business is considered phase 4, that you pay attention and try to learn the lessons of phase 1, 2, 3 as we move forward, because we're going to learn a lot more in these next phases that will assist you when you reopen back in whatever time frame that is, 28 days away. One of the things I would like for you to consider also is to take advantage, this is considered phase 4, that you pay attention and try to learn the lessons of phase 1, 2, 3 as we move forward, because we're going to learn a lot more in these next phases.
If you're, Jeff, if you're, I'm getting some chat questions. If people are, if you could put yourself on mute. If those of you who aren't speaking could go on mute, the background noise is starting to build up here.
Is to take advantage, this is considered phase 4, that you pay attention and try to learn the lessons of phase 1, 2, 3 as we move forward, because we're going to learn a lot more in these next phases. Mike, I really don't know what's happening, but I'm getting some echo and feedback.
I think if people could put themselves on mute, if they're not speaking, it'll help a great deal, I think.
Yeah, and maybe it's just better that we dive into some of the questions that people may have specifically, and maybe we can hope to get answers to you. Just so you know, by way of this housekeeping items, if you have a question that you think of after this call, please go onto our columbiacomeback.com site, or you can email us at info@columbiacomeback.com. And we try to turn around questions within a 24 to 48 hour time frame, specifically for your phases or industry sector. If we can't answer it here today, Mike or myself can't answer it, or you don't have someone with a core competency in that area, we do reach out to our subject matter experts to ask for clarification. So with that said, Sean asked, are there any updates on PPE purchasing through Hudson Hall?
Hi, this is Tammy, and yes and no. Mike, I think we were, I had some back and forth with Chuck Rosenthal of the Hudson Business Coalition, and he said he was trying to set up a conference call with you and Rob. And in the meantime, we've gone ahead and just started sourcing wholesale supplies. And we're costing them out. And as well, I should share with everyone a list of what we're costing. And if there are other items that people feel that they will need, we're happy to source them. And our goal is to, in the next day or two, come up with the best pricing for the best products, and then go ahead and order it and try and get it up on our website next week.
One of the, I was able to reach Supervisor Lagonia, and he has been purchasing and coordinating the collection of all the PPE materials needed by the county, other than the hospital. And, you know, in the beginning, of course, they were on short supply and very expensive. And his advice to us was he's ready and able to help us if we would need to discuss where we can get bulk supplies. But his concern is that to the extent that this system is set up, that people pay when they order, because it does sometimes take a certain amount of time to get. And if someone gets very nervous about whether you can deliver, they go out and buy it and then never fulfill their order. And the underlying organization ends up with a lot of, well, could end up with a lot of PPE materials that they bought and have not sold. So his concern to us was for you and I and the Hudson Business Coalition to figure out a model that minimizes the amount of pre-purchased items. So but otherwise, I think we can continue the way you described.
And noted, Mike, although if we're really going to get this wholesale, and there are providers, we're talking about buying pallets, which cannot, you know, they have to come on. No. It's not going to be an overnight shipment. We need.
Well, and I think, you know, some of it is to the extent that, you know, it's masks, it's sanitizer. That may be easier because, you know, we're going to need those through some period of time. He's stuck with 6 thermometers that, you know, the gun thermometers that he bought at $100 a piece, because people said, get me one. And then when he showed up with it a week later, they said, oh, well, you know, I couldn't wait. I went and got it. So, you know, there's got to be, I think it depends on what we're purchasing. You know, maybe there's certain things that they have to be prepaid for, and other things that are more common and know we're going to use and run out of that we don't, that we could advance the money to you under a small business loan.
Okay. Well, we'll complete the sourcing and costing, and then we can decide what to pre-purchase and what to do on a
I said basis. That we could sell it to someone who donates it for a tax deduction to the Smithsonian after this is all over, to have a record of what we've all gone through. But, what if we could get some feedback about? It's not tough. It's got to be tough to be in the last phase, and recognizing that you know, any type of pushback, any type of delay could be mid-July. At the same time, you know, we were told earlier last week that we couldn't open. And then, I don't know, they went and put some analysis together and recalculated whether the Capital Region Hospital should be totally responsible for all the nursing home infection, and those who have been 130 have come up from New York City, and the state recalibrated it. I mean, the state could have just as easily said, no, we're not going to recalibrate it. So I think there's some pressure, not political, but, you know, maybe polling that is indicating that this should move faster, but some people think it should move slower. And one of the things that we talked about on one of the restaurant phase 3 calls was, what if someone shows up at your facility and says, I'm not wearing a mask? And either they're your best customer or they're just a belligerent, self-preservationist. So, Sean, with some of the issues we talked about, maybe could be a jump-off point for the rest of the group to engage in. I think you're on mute. There you go.
I just took myself off. Sure. I'm sorry. I've been, listening and typing notes as we went along. So sorry. I just got Tammy's List. So we'll talk with her about ordering stuff. So I'm sorry. In terms of like how we're phasing things, Mike, what would you like?
Yeah, I guess when I look at the list here, we have a good cross section of arts, cultural organizations, recreational, and then education. So I guess based on where we are and what you know, what information do you need and what help do you need?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it was extremely helpful on the call on Wednesday to hear you kind of talk about how, all of us probably should have operational elements of our business elements that fall into more than just one phase, right? So technically, Olana is phase 4. It's a museum, recreation, historic site kind of, situation, but really we have administrative support, fundraising, we have office workers, so to be able to bring them back, in the June 3rd date is hugely helpful to start to, again, in a way that is totally within the guidelines, 50% capacity, limiting the office environments where, so we've created a whole sort of spreadsheet that does that for our staff in the 2 buildings that we have use of at Olana. And then, I think though that there are a lot of performing arts venues here that have very specific issues, about their facility and fixed seating or unfixed seating. And so maybe there's a lot of questions about how, what is going to be possible. And, you can't sell tickets to something outside and there's a thunderstorm either, it's
yeah. I know Ruth Adams is here from Art Omai. You have the similar situation where, some aspects of your facilities are available for people to enjoy now and others are on a list for waiting. How has it been balanced out? Is it hard to tell a visitor that, you can't go in there, but you can go over here?
Well, hi, Mike, thanks. I would say that generally things have been pretty good. We've been ratcheting down our parking spaces and opening more up depending on what's going on as far as cases going up or general neighbor sentiments, all kinds of things. And we are always, since the beginning, have worked in concert with the DOH and the sheriff and the town board. But a couple of weeks ago, I would say, when the New York State sort of ratcheted down their parking spaces, we started getting a new influx of a fair amount of people traveling from over an hour and a half away, saying, in caravans. So like, please don't turn us away. We drove 2 hours and my 3 friends and their cars are there already. So that's when we really tried to limit our number of parking spaces. And we sent out social media saying, we want people to stay home. Please follow New York State guidelines. Don't travel more than a half an hour from your home, blah, blah. But we've had one belligerent visitor who really was aggressive with a staff person, and that staff person was ready to call the police, and the guy finally left. So it's a concern. I want to keep staff safe, and I'm prepared. I basically tell them, if you don't feel safe, get in your car and go home. Just nobody has to, you don't have to attend the parking lot. And we've created a parking lot that can stand alone so that we just are all about flexibility. And, it's really difficult to tell a young staff person, tell all those people to put masks on. I just don't feel like I can put young staff people at risk and in a situation where they might, who knows?
And we talked a little bit about that with retail and restaurant, that, those of us who were dormitory counselors in college are going to be back, keeping people in the areas they're supposed to be in and not beyond. I guess one of the other aspects of this is where you have people who are on unemployment, or where you're been hiring people in the gig economy who have multiple jobs and you're one of them. If they're on unemployment and they come back to help you, it's pretty strict rules about losing how you lose unemployment benefits. And your staffing model, we've been talking about, you all have fixed costs that you've been trying to cover with either PPP money or savings or whatever, but now you're going to have variable costs as you ramp back up. And if you bring everyone back at once, you're going to be into a spiral of failure. And unfortunately, Brookings has done an analysis that shows, over 400 of the 2,000 businesses in the county have at a significant risk of failure. And what we're seeing with people defining failure is not just going out of business because you don't generate enough revenue to survive. There are a number of people who have made the analytical decision that based on what it would cost to reopen, if you're in a restaurant and you have to buy all the food again and bring all the staff in, that they don't want to take the risk of the unknown response of the public and the consumer until so many restaurants are going to keep just doing takeout. They won't open for in restaurant seating. But some businesses are going out of business as a analytical decision that they don't think this is the business they should be in anymore.
I mean, sorry, Jeff.
No, I was going to go ahead, Sean. I have a point of clarification.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to sort of give examples, share what we're thinking. I mean, we usually hire 25 seasonal employees for 6 months, in the high season, and we're not hiring them at all. There's no possibility. We're going to totally just try to hold on to our full-time staff, which is what we've done. We put everybody on 4 days a week and 80% salary. That's saving us some. We got our loan. We got, we've got some reserve. So, but we are definitely in our emergency budget looking at laying off full-time staff come July, August, if we're not able, if that business analysis that you just mentioned, doesn't go in the positive direction, if we're not getting enough revenue from tickets and the tours we can offer, and we're not going to be bringing people into the house in any time in the near future. So, anyway, I don't need to go down those rabbit holes, but, I think that's where the economic part of this is just going to start to cascade, right? I mean, there's those 25 people who, we gave a decent salary. We were paying $20 an hour for seasonal staff, right? That was our model, was to pay a very good hourly wage to get really great, creative, talented people, artists, designers, other, people who teach and otherwise, and fantastic, part of what we've built in this area. And I think that's very much in danger, along with access just for the general public through and the schools and others. These are cultural venues as educational resources, I think, is in real danger as well, because of just needing to do a core amount of operation to survive versus the and the grants that we've had. Most of the foundations are turning them over to general operating, which we greatly appreciate. But that means those special programs that were about access, that were about diversity initiatives, have had to be shelved. So that's a bigger issue in our cultural sphere.
Yeah. Mike, I had a question about the CAP region from the Jeannie Stark. And it asked about wedding venues, but then it also references the Mid-Hudson region for phased reopening of hospitality. I just think it's important that we understand that out of the 10 regions, each are opening up at their own separate time. So many of the regions, like I've just referenced, CAP region is open for phase 1. Mid-Hudson is purged to be reopening for phase 1 in a week or so. So when you talk about phases, you're talking about within a particular region. And there's no distinction between regions and phases. So when for instance, Long Island's purged to reopen, they'll reopen at phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3, phase 4. their reopening includes the same industry sectors that our phase reopening includes, but they're just opening up behind us. So I just think it's important that we understand that even in the Mid-Hudson region, for hospitality, there's a phase, and that's probably going to be phase 4 for wedding venues. And Mike, if you have anything to add to that, I appreciate it.
No, I think that's a valuable clarification. So, you could be a wedding planner, and you could have a client who gets irate when you say that, I have a wedding this weekend in Columbia County, and their wedding was canceled because they can't open up in the Hudson Valley, the lower Hudson Valley, for 2 more weeks. So, and we had a call from a wedding planner who does over 200 weddings a year, and a third of them are in Columbia County. And we did have some discussion with some people on the previous call relating to the fact, well, if you had a 200-person wedding, can you now have 50%? No, it's 50% of your occupancy capacity. So, can you have it outside? Well, who's going to trace all the waiters and people that bring the flowers? And because the most important part of the guidelines is to track everyone you came in contact with. So if you get sick, they can go out and warn them and get them to quarantine. So, Sean had said that, one of the things they were going to do is just everything by credit card. So they knew who was there that day by timestamp almost.
Mike. Hi, it's Liz from Basilica again. Yeah, so most of our business will be in stage 4 now. We had originally thought weddings were going to be in stage 3. So that's stage 4. Basilica Arts, everything we do with Soundscape permanently, that's obviously stage 4 as well. I think what Jeannie was saying, she had emailed you and emailed me. The Mid-Hudson region had come up with sort of a phase thing of what, for hospitality specifically, what each phase would kind of look like. And I guess we were wondering, is that something that Capital Region will come up with, if it's like good. We were saying about.
And like my comments are like so probably insignificant, and you're probably going to say, no, can't do that. And that is like,
Peg Patterson,
it's just spacing.
you're
like I feel like it's
not muted.
So spaced out, like where Dear Friends of Dish Hudson appears. I feel like it could go up like half as much.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear us? Liz, I think that.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was that.
Mike or Jeff, can you mute her as host?
Oh. Learn something new every day. Let's see. I guess I'd have to go find her.
Yeah, you can just go search participant or
Yeah,
No.
sorry. So yeah, Mike. So what I was saying was that, I guess it's just hard. And we're all in the same boat. I know, obviously, Sean and Olana and Omai, and any mass, it's the mass gathering.
Then there's nothing more to say. It's fine.
Who is this person talking
Who
to?
is this? What is her name?
Peg Patterson.
Okay, I found her. I'm going to mute her.
Hi, this is Christy Peck. I'm trying to text her in the background to tell her to
Wait,
mute, but
I
hopefully
found
she'll
her.
get it.
Oops. Let's see. Mute.
All right.
Let's see. I may have.
Oh, good. Sorry. So I was just saying, we're all kind of dealing with, all these big spaces about just the mass gathering things. And, we have, like you were saying yesterday and today, if there's a wedding of 300, are we looking at, half of that is 150, but it's not just the wedding participants, it's the staff that's involved that has to be there. What is this looking like for us? What is, into phase 4? Is it, our staff, and vendors wearing masks? Are we still doing social distancing? I realize these are all questions we might not have the answer to, but I was hoping that when we get closer to phase 4, that the Capital Region would maybe give us a little bit of an outline. We're all going to be prepping up until that point, but I think it's.
Was the material you're referencing from the Hudson Valley, from the webinar that Hudson Valley Economic Development did a few weeks ago? Or
yeah, Jeannie, are you on? Do you want to speak to that?
Well, why don't we just get in the time? Why don't we just get that, and we can go to the regional control room, because we know that one of the things we're trying to put on our resource pages, in addition to the state guidelines that will be specific for each phase are the industry association guidelines and manuals, and from Disney's guidebook as to how they're going to reopen to the American Lodging and State Restaurant Association and National Museums and different groups that have the resources and the staff to put all these things together. And let's see what we can get the regional control room to look at, considering Saratoga and Warren County with Lake George. I mean, as a tourist mecca of the upper Hudson Valley, it would be certainly wise to address those issues. So thank you. If you can get me that, I'll follow up. Dr. Drummer with education. I guess you can't have summer school. You're all online.
Yes, we're working remotely, learning remotely through the summer. SUNY is, we are following SUNY and the governor's guidelines, obviously, and the SUNY sector of community colleges wants to move forward as much as we can, being consistent with our operations in the fall. So we are looking at a number of options, but my hunch is that we are going to be mostly remote in the fall, except for kinetic classes that do not do well remotely, such as automotive technology, building construction technology, nursing clinicals, art, science labs. So right now we are engaged in a major operations initiative called Co-Green Forward Operations. And our buildings and grounds director is reviewing all of the guidelines with respect to the building, so that when we start bringing employees back, which isn't going to be anytime soon, the hallways will have, how the supermarkets now have one-way arrows. We're going to have, the corridors are going to be marked, with the directions that you can go. The density in the building is going to be dramatically reduced. And we're just erring on the side of caution. My goal is to keep COVID-19 out of Columbia Green. Right now, none of our employees has any sign of the disease at all. Touch wood that continues. We've been very, very careful, using, PPE for the essential workers who happen to be on campus. But it's not easy. And our students, while they've been adapting quite well, to the online environment, they don't prefer it to face-to-face. They really want that personal touch, with the faculty member in a classroom. But that's certainly not going to happen anytime soon until we have a vaccine.
Jonathan or Jonah from Hudson I was looking to.
Sure, I'll keep it very brief, but I'd like to say hello to everyone and enthusiastic about today's call on every level. My updates are as follows, and Michael, you're doing such a great job at sharing. I think there's some people waiting in to get into the portal of the meeting that could be resourceful or could contribute, but I agree with everything that's been said so far, particularly the sourcing update and materials update, and would be very interested to hear if there's any economic opportunity to help Hudson Hall's efforts in that arena. My updates are brief. It's that the Hudson Eye is technically a grant. That grant has two prongs, basically. One is arts and culture, which would be tier 4. But the secondary aspect of this grant is job creation. The grant is economically stable. There's been no economic hit of any kind. In fact, with some of the remote workforce, we're up a bit. And cautiously, and with our board oversight, we are projecting to continue in September. That is with full-time curatorial programming. And really what that looks like is outdoor, walkable, distant experiences for the second week in September. And then the other thing which I'd like to put into the room, if that's all right, is a lot of us on the task force have been looking at venue safety. So that's now in a customized Hudson venue safety format, I believe. And we were circulating with Tammy some of the Event Safety Alliance reopening guides in case that's a resource. Finally, if I'm not mistaken, Cuomo's tracking program was announced last night, and I think it's the most ambitious in the nation. So if it would be valuable to spend a moment on tracking in New York State, it seems as though there's like huge infrastructure for that. And I'm just getting up to date on that announcement from last night myself.
I think we have everyone in, and what we're going to do next time is set this up where I don't have to be the one that admits you, because when I'm trying to communicate with you, I missed a few people, so I apologize if you had to be in the waiting room too long.
Does anyone have knowledge or update on the tracking infrastructure of the state? Because I'm just digesting that from yesterday evening.
Yeah,
we saw the press release, and what was interesting, as you know, we were delayed opening from Saturday or Sunday till Wednesday because we needed 366 tracers or trackers. And the interesting part is that was the estimated number we would need after everyone was opened, but you had to have those people in place. It's a 5 or 6 hour course. Anyway, any one of us could go online at Johns Hopkins and sign up, and you get quite a bit of information about how that whole process will work. But at the same time, what they did was many counties and city governments had people on staff get onto the site quickly and get trained and certified. What we need now is additional people to backfill those folks, because they're not, it's more likely than not that they're not going to actually be the tracers, because by the time the full region comes back up, they'll have been backfilled. It's a $25 an hour job with no benefits, kind of like a super census taker position. So if you know of anyone who's out of work and not eligible for the unemployment and the $600 extra through July 31st, and they are interested in being a tracker, that link is on our website as well. That brings up the issue of can you get all of your staff back? If some businesses, depending on the salary or compensation range of the staff, have found that I don't want to take the risk coming back because I'm actually making more than you were paying me when I was working for you. And some of that is legitimate and I'm sure sincere. And other situations, it may be that they are making $100 or $200 more a week on the unemployment, and that was intended by the government as part of a stimulus. But has that been a problem? I know some businesses have told us they call people back and they say, we're not interested at this point in coming back. Which at that point you can actually, they can get taken off unemployment and they're hurt even more. So and if you're truly not coming back because you're concerned about your health, it puts people on the other side of the coin in a real difficult position.
Mike, I have a question. What about businesses who are family members, but the schools are not open, and they're deemed that their businesses can open, but they have the kids at home? Would they be forced to open regardless?
Interesting question. I guess what an example, I guess, where the living space is in the back of the store kind of thing, or what's the example?
Yeah, similar. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess no one can be forced to open, and that's another issue that's come up, that if you're in a main street and everybody else opens and you don't because you're not ready, either because of your health profile or your concerns, will the public think that you're closed forever? Or will they think you've gone out of business or what? And so, I think each of those decisions are going to have to be made in the context of, what your individual needs are personally, both, if you're in a group that's has higher risk than the rest of us for catching the virus, then you certainly don't want to expose yourself or your family.
I'll share that.
I guess this is sometimes frustrating for Jeff and I because we'd like to have better answers, but I think what we've discovered was we do have some staff here taking notes, and your questions we have recorded, and it helps us go to the state and try to get some clarification on these things, and we will begin to find a method to get that information back to those of you who are participating.
So in that regard, Mike, I just wanted to sort of flag something that came up when I looked at my email feed this morning, and I belong to a lot of other cultural organizations, as a supporter or member or whatever, and get a lot of emails, of course, and a couple in the lower Hudson Valley, one in Yonkers this morning, is announcing they're opening this weekend for, tours. And it just I'm just wondering, is there some mechanism in the state, because, the lower Hudson is certainly not open, right? I mean, it hasn't met its basic criteria yet. So, and I would get, sort of supporters, board members who are also members of that organization saying, hey, so what's going on here? Why are you guys slow? So-and-so down in Yonkers is opening up, and they were a lot more near the epicenter of things, So is there anybody on the state level who's monitoring these kind of things?
Yes. We posted yesterday the guidance as to how will New York State enforce the COVID-19 guidelines. And again, some of it's going to be on those of you who are operating the business or the facility, and we have had those discussions as to how do you put junior staff or others in the path of someone who's just going to be uncooperative. In the other context, there is a 24/7 online and telephone hotline to report people. So, you're going to have legitimate reports, and, people who might, like me when I'm older, might just, hey, I'm going to turn those people in.
I'm not narking. No.
The neighbor that doesn't like you. And so they will be reviewed by a task force, and if appropriate, it will be referred to the local authorities. And authorities should use the least invasive enforcement approach necessary to achieve compliance. Now, we live in a rural county, and we have a great sheriff's department, and in some cases, constabularies, and a great presence by the state police. But, when I first took this job, I visited the town halls of 18 towns in the county, and it took me 7 hours. We don't have that many people to enforce these random apparent violations.
Well, I think, Mike, and maybe this will give you some solace, Sean, and the others who have this concern, is that rogue individuals like that could potentially impact their region's ability to open up in the next phase. And so what I wrote a note was that, it's sort of hard to cull those people into not speaking for the entire counties that they represent or regions, but there's repercussions and ramifications if you are sounding such alarms that will get your region shut down. And I doubt if anyone wants to stare at the bottom of that barrel if that was to occur.
Yeah. But I think it's good to be able to point out when we have a call later with Empire State Development that these are the concerns, and and that how will you actually have enforcement? I think that the group that has the best opportunity for enforcement, unfortunately, is restaurants, because they can do it through the state liquor authority. Or, real estate brokers have very strict rules about virtual showing of homes and things right now, and they're licensed. So, but if you're an unlicensed, well, we've seen a lot of it. The world is full of us folks who push envelopes as far as we can.
To give you a little more further context, for example, many of our hotels have been open as essential businesses, but they're precluded from I Love New York to advertise outside of their individual counties, to advertise for people to come up to New York or to their particular counties. So it's a way of self-policing. It's a way so we can make sure that those numbers, we stay within those numbers that the governor will allow us to open. And I hopefully people will understand that we're all in this together. And even if you want to act in a rogue manner, or that your actions could actually preclude many of your neighbors and friends and colleagues in your region from continuing to reopen in the phased process. And I think maybe we can raise that at the regional level, Mike, just so the governor can just point that out in his press briefings, that this is a time for us to act as collectively and not as individuals.
Oops, okay, hold on here. Anyone else have some specific concerns, observations, things that we might be able to raise to a higher authority? Well, it is difficult for Jeff and I, as I said, because we are generally folks that like to have real answers, and we don't want to take any more of your time. Please feel free to contact us on the website, info. What is it? Info at, I always get these confused. There's so many.
It's info at columbiacomeback.com. And those come to Mike's staff and my staff. And again, we try to turn those questions around in 24 hours, 48 hours as a max.
And sometimes, one we had today was about since tennis courts are now able to open, when are you going to open the tennis courts? Well, that's really up to the town or the city or the village that owns the public tennis court. So we'll pass those type of questions on to those individual municipal officials, but let the person know that we followed up, but we don't have any control over that.
So I had a question about education. I know that the governor said, just announced that summer school is going to be remote, but any indication for City of Hudson in particular about thinking about the autumn yet, or too early to tell?
My understanding is all public schools have to put a plan together as to by mid-July as to if they were to open, what would they do? And I think part of that's going to be how many come back like the restaurants and say it's impossible to do. So we've got to come up with another model. I know many of you in the arts arena have, gone with virtual programming and things to keep your core audiences aware of your continued operations and existence. And I think some of that and some of the, there's some discussion in the Albany area, which we might want to take a look at here, and we can reach out to BOCES. But if there is going to be online elementary and secondary school in the fall, should we be working together as arts and cultural organizations to create content that through BOCES that can be shared with all of the 8 districts in Columbia County, the 8 districts in Greene County, and the districts in Rensselaer County that are part of Questar.
That sounds like a great thought there. I think something that should be pursued, because I know there's so many approaches and schools are getting so much stuff thrown at them. So to the degree that we on our side who work with the schools regularly could maybe band together and organize more on a curricular basis, I think that's an excellent thought, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could set up in July or, when it's appropriate at your call, something, with a superintendent and just sort of, talk it out a little bit.
Well, and I think one of the aspects of that would be, we could be like the movies we used to watch in the last week of school. At least the teacher would get a break and the students would get good content in a much broader spectrum than they might otherwise ever see. So when we're doing things, there'll be some benefit out of this. I know Sean and I talked about programming. I'm the board chair at the Albany Institute of History and Art. And, how do you package programming that people can't come? How do you get it to them? I think it was on one of these calls, someone said, we should stop for a minute. We're all trying to think of what we should be doing. What do we think our patron or client or customer want us to do? And that's where I think there's too many surveys out there. We did one as well, but some of the questions give you a sense, or looking at the responses, we could all be in our mind figuring out how we're going to do this, but it's not what people want us to do. So, well, have a great weekend. It's beautiful weather. It's obviously, Memorial Day observation is a reflective holiday. And at the same time, we all need to be able to get outdoors and enjoy places like Art Omai and Alana and PS21 and any of the other organizations out there that I can't see because I can only see 8
Please
people.
wait for not this weekend.
Okay. Well, you can come and can't you walk around as a...
You can. I'm joking, and please do. Just try to use the ends of the day. We're really in a microscope right now, regionally for parks, because the Mid-Hudson hasn't opened, and Southern Columbia counties proximate. And so we've got everybody. All the deputy commissioners are down here for Alana and Lake Taconic this weekend, and just concerned that we are able to keep maintaining a good use of the property in an appropriate way. Otherwise, it could really have ramifications going forward about
work
things.
on Monday and go there on Wednesday. How about that?
Yeah.
I think
I'll be there on Monday, walking around with a vest, telling people to stay away from each other.
I hope this was helpful. Jeff, do you have any final words?
No, I think that this has been a good conversation. I would encourage everyone to check our columbiacomeback.com for resources that could be utilized. Sean and I forgot who else about the Wild West mentality. We'll get you some more information on that this weekend about how we can rein in some of the outliners who are doing things that can impact our region. So I want to thank everyone for your time and your questions. If you have more questions, again, go to info@columbiacomeback.com. And again, we try to turn those around in 24 to 48 hours. Have a great weekend.
It's very hard to get a read of what your body language or facial expression. So if we didn't satisfy at least at some extent what you were looking for, email us on how we can do better in responding to that, because I can adapt pretty well and I can see whether I'm losing you in a room, but I can't really do it here. And it's hard to know what we really need to do to help you. So let us know. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jeff.